a patriot without equal. That's how President Cyril Ramaphosa has described the late Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, the Nobel Peace Prize-winning Anglican cleric, passed away at the age of 90. To help us take a look at the Arch's history, I'm joined now by Director of Archives and Dialogue at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Verne Harris. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, you're the man with the memorable pictures and history books that really take us back to the type of man Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu was and the role he played in South Africa and the world at large. What's your take as you recall some of the history and, as we reflect on his life today?
Well, thank you very much. It's still a time of mourning for us and very much of making sense of things. But let me say just a couple of things. On the one hand, the Arch for us represents speaking truth to power without fear or favor. And he did this during the apartheid era, and he has done it through the democratic era, as difficult as that has been. I think he also exemplifies a voice that is independent, that is critical, and one that is also self-reflective. The Arch was known for his great sense of humor, but I think fundamentally what is important about that humor is that he knew how to laugh at himself, and very few people in leadership positions can do that. But of course, he made mistakes, and there are aspects of his legacy which are open to critique.
He made mistakes, but he was able to break almost any deadlock. What are some crucial moments in history that will always be remembered?
Well, I think the first one that stands out in memory is the role he played during the 1980s, where he was absolutely critical to the success of the international sanctions, which played a key role in bringing apartheid to an end. Then, of course, during the transition, he was part of peacemaking processes, working closely with structures of the mass democratic movement, but also talking always to the state when necessary. And then thirdly, I would say the work he did in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Sadly, the work that was started, in my view, so well, was never followed through with. The recommendations were never implemented, and so, especially for young people looking back, very often they criticize Archbishop Tutu and the Truth Commission, but actually the criticism should be leveled at those in power who chose not to implement the recommendations.
And what about the notion of the Rainbow Nation and, did it sort of trip us in the 1990s?
Well, I think it did, and in retrospect, I think it was perhaps an unfortunate metaphor. But I think we need to problematize this because Archbishop Tutu was not arguing with that rainbow metaphor for a let's all live happily together, let's forget the past and move on. He was also arguing very strongly for a reckoning and an accountability and a redistribution of wealth. And at the same time as he was talking about a rainbow nation, he was also challenging government under the leadership of Nelson Mandela for its economic policies, for failures with the Reconstruction and Development Program. He was arguing for a wealth tax. So it wasn't that soft reductionist view that we hear very often now in the critique. We have to be, I think, very aware of the complexity.
He's also hailed as a man who never shied away from speaking the truth, even in instances where it clashed with politics and religion. I mean, what sort of legacy does that leave behind?
I think it's a very powerful legacy because today in South Africa, it's very important that institutions like the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which have historic links with the ruling party, with the liberation movements, guard very jealously their right to critique what's happening now and to argue for the kinds of changes that are more critical now than they were 20 years ago. So for me, that's a very powerful legacy, and it's one that gives us encouragement in times of difficulty. I think anybody who is involved in social justice work now, at the end of 2021, is feeling exhausted. We're fighting battles that we thought we were going to win in the 1990s and early 2000s. And Archbishop Tutu's life inspires us to keep working, even though we feel that perhaps we won't win this.
The Arch's contagious laughter and his sense of humor is regarded as perhaps a tool that assisted even when South Africa faced really tough times. It was almost seen as a sense of healing. As you go through the archives and take a look at some of the pictures, what stands out for you as you go through them and watch the Arch throughout the decades and, you know, the role and the work he did for South Africa and perhaps the continent at large?
Well, you know, at a level of analysis, what stands out for me is his warmth. It's very easy for people in elevated positions, president of a country, head of a church and so on, of a movement, to become disconnected from communities. But the Arch had that quality which made him approachable and which inspires people in ways that elevated icons can't. But in terms of humor, maybe let me share one anecdote. I remember working through Madiba's gift collection maybe 10 years ago now, and our team found an item which didn't belong to Madiba. It was actually a gift to Archbishop Tutu. And we were then asked, this is my colleague Cyril and I, we were asked to go to Cape Town and deliver this to the Archbishop. And we did so in the cathedral, in front of many people. We were having a coffee with the Arch. And when we explained and showed him this item, he laughed and he said, well, are you telling me that Madiba is a thief? Which, you know, made us laugh in a difficult situation, but that was the Arch. That was him.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Verne Harris, speaking to Archbishop Tutu's life in history and pictures, of course, with archives that he's gone through and really telling a personal story there as we wrap up our discussion.